Hi there, Paul Roy here. Just finished an exciting podcast series called Search and Rescue NZ. Stories of daring adventures in the caves, bush, mountains and rivers of New Zealand, and what happens when things go wrong. Tales of bravery and heartbreaking loss. Keep listening to hear the first episode, Between Heaven and Earth. Then look for Search and Rescue NZ in your favourite podcast app to hear the rest of the series.
He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Hi, I'm Paul Roy, and just a word of warning. This series contains graphic descriptions of rescues and fatalities, as well as some spicy language. Although at times confronting, they are the unfiltered reality of the work of land search and rescue volunteers and those that have been rescued. So if unsettling personal stories affect you, a strong cup of tea might be in order.
Unknown caller.
This one would be one. Aaron Nicholson, how you getting on?
So we've got a party of two. John Glynn, 83-year-old male, very fit and able and still apparently climbing mountains.
This series will look at the changing face of search and rescue in New Zealand.
All the searches were just done locally in those days. There was no outsiders came in to give you a hand or anything. It was the rangers, the policemen from Aotearoa and the railway boys.
From the do-it-yourself operations of the 60s.
All we did was just splint one leg to the other and got him in that bloody stretcher and just virtually said, well, you just have to put up with the bloody pain.
To today's highly managed rescues.
Just a radio check, looks like we got comms from here, which is awesome, but 60 knot winds, raining, no sign yet.
All have one thing in common. Something went wrong and someone needed help.
I was just like, oh great, like shit, we fucked up.
Over the decades, there have been thousands of search and rescues. Most successful, some not.
I remember Dave and I having this what the fuck conversation about, who makes that call, to stop CPR.
Their stories will take us from the roof of New Zealand.
When we were 16, we got within 300 feet, 100 metres of the summit rocks of Cook while we were on a school geography trip.
Deep underground.
Diving through those sumps, you're basically in a world where very few people will ever reach you.
And everything in between.
His face was a mess. He had this huge bulge on his head and his eye was all messed up and there was blood everywhere.
Including bush and river rescues.
People kind of have this weird vision of how rescuers are, like totally in control all the time and, calm, wonderful people.
And stories of love.
I was about 21 and he was about 27. Gorgeous guy.
And loss.
I thought he was absolutely immortal.
Mountain rescues conjure up images of storms and blizzards, exhausted climbers battling an unforgiving environment. And there will be plenty of those in this series. But a tragedy can just as easily happen on a sunny, carefree day, with picture postcard views and no hint of drama or danger. Episode 1, Between Heaven and Earth. I'm standing at the start of the climb to Cascade Saddle, in the West Matukituki, part of Mount Aspiring National Park, within sight of the mountain itself, and in summer, a popular 3-day cross-country trip to the Dart or Rees Valley. The Alpine crossing is heavily promoted on social media and in guidebooks as a must-do and attracts those who may not realise its dangers. The track leads off uphill From just behind the refurbished Mount Aspiring hut, built in 1949, and is an easy 2-hour stroll from the road end. Another reason it attracts thousands of climbers, trampers and day walkers. But the steep 1400-metre climb to Cascade Saddle is no walk in the park and has an unfortunate history of accidents and fatalities. These days, there is a very prominent sign at the start of the track which reads, "Danger. The Cascade Saddle route is hazardous in adverse weather conditions. Multiple fatalities have occurred on this route due to slippery conditions, snow, ice and wet weather. Flooded side streams, heavy rain and snow melt. Have the skills, experience and equipment for alpine travel and river crossings. Failure to do so may result in serious injury or death. Be prepared to turn back. It's not worth the risk." A pretty blunt warning. This sign wasn't here in 2005, when our story begins.
It was almost instantaneous, just completely fell for him.
This is Irish-born Helen McClements, 26 at the time. She and her 29-year-old boyfriend, Donal Derry, were very much in love when they decided to come to New Zealand from Ireland to do some walking.
And his aim was to go and live and work in New Zealand. And I mean, if Donal honestly had said to me, "Do you want to go to, Outer Mongolia?" I'd have said yes.
So how did you decide to go to Cascade Saddle? How did you find out about it?
Donal had researched it and he was super excited. He said, "Look, I really want you to do this. I think you'll enjoy it. It's stunning, Mount Aspiring." And he said, you'll have no problem.
Helen had spent time in the hills, but nothing hard. But her boyfriend Donal was much more experienced with climbs in the European Alps, Great Britain and New Zealand on a previous trip. Before they arrived in Wanaka, they had been tramping in the relatively benign Nelson Lakes National Park. On the morning of January the 11th, 2005, they left with an English friend, Tom Neal, to climb to Cascade Saddle and spend the night. This is the crossing that inspired all those warnings.
When we did the Cascade Saddle, we were walking up and it was stunning. I mean, I have photographs of me on the way up and I'm wearing a little white shirt and I have my sunglasses on. I have a little pink bandana. Donal had a t-shirt and we were just walking along. It was really beautiful. We did meet a couple of walkers, young men. They had done it in the one day in trainers and we had our big proper hiking boots on and they did just say to us, "Watch out for that grass. Watch for the grass because if you slip in that, you'll. We were both fit and it was joyous. I remember finding the actual walk up, I don't remember being exhausted. I don't remember feeling tense. We actually laughed so much. And I remember being at the top thinking, this is why Donal loves this so much. I totally get it. And we could hear in the background there were avalanches. So it was really, I just felt like this real sense of being suspended between heaven and earth. I was like, this is just transcendental. This is completely nothing I've experienced before. We had our little Trangia stove and I had probably rubbishy little noodles to eat to keep it light. Donal was really obsessed with keeping everything light. And so we didn't have a lot to carry and we all went to bed. We were sharing the same tent and then this Kia parrot kept trying to get in. And I remember Donal saying to me, "I'm so glad you like this. I'm so glad." And I said, "Oh, I do. I really love it."
On the same day, a New Zealand couple from Queenstown were on their way to the Dart Glacier, which also meant crossing Cascade Saddle.
Christine and I were planning a ski touring trip to the Himalayas and we'd been working on some gear and we decided, well, let's do a ski trip. And
this is Eric Bradshaw, who grew up in an adventurous family. Both his parents were scientists who had visited Antarctica multiple times, and Eric tramped and climbed with them often. Eric, aged 37, was an experienced mountaineer and very much at home in the hills. Living in Queenstown, he and his girlfriend Christine Ryan were both looking forward to a couple of days' break in the mountains.
We went up to the top of the glacier and we sort of camped in this little sort of hollow near Cascade Saddle. It's just absolutely perfect weather, like blue skies, completely still even on top of the mountains. And we noticed sort of beyond us, like another maybe half kilometre away, there was another tent we could see.
Seeing the tent was a casual observation by Eric and Christine, who thought nothing more about it. That was the tent of Irish couple Helen and Donal and their English friend Tom Neal. Just another party enjoying the grand views of Mount Aspiring.
Absolutely wonderful evenings. And we spent a night up there and things had been going very well. I actually proposed to Christine that night.
I said yes. When we woke up that morning, we were, feeling pretty loved up and on cloud nine. And we were just going to wander down and head home.
Here's Helen from the other party.
I remember it being a really lovely day, a beautiful descent. I can't remember if we ate porridge or something. I always remember Donal hating porridge, but he ate it whenever he sort of put up with it, or sold it, as we say in Northern Ireland, if he was climbing. And then I think we met some water at some point, and I took my boots off and had my feet in the water, and then we crossed and I put my boots on again.
And we just sort of casually sort of wandered back towards Cascade Saddle, and we noticed them crossing a patch of snow, and they didn't look too certain about what they were doing. And I remember sort of glancing across going, they're not so experienced, and maybe even feeling slightly pleased with myself that I felt so comfortable and other people didn't. Christine and I carried on, and there's a sort of well-recognised place called the Pylon, which is marked on the map, and it's basically where the track drops off down into the Matuki-tuki.
While Eric and Christine stopped to have lunch, the trio ahead of them began their descent. The route from the Pylon down to the Matuki-tuki is the crux of the Cascade Saddle crossing, and having been over it myself, a little care is needed, especially going down.
And we were really having a very pleasant descent, and then suddenly I just slipped and it just kept going. I remember at first, and this is the most awful bit, as I slid, I remember thinking, whoa, gosh, I'm going quite fast. And nearly laughing because I had no idea. I thought I was just going to slide a bit. I had no idea that I was near a cliff edge. And then Donal saw me, and this is again what I never get over. He just leapt to get me. It was instantaneous. He just saw that I was going and grabbed me.
Right, so he was ahead of you and you slipped, and then he sort of threw himself backwards across to catch you and trying to stop you.
Yeah, well, we were all kind of don't even know. I think it was quite a wide space, and I had slipped, and then he looked and saw me and just instantaneously threw himself to get me, because you're not even aware where you're falling. You don't know if you're falling off a cliff. You just know that suddenly you're in free fall, and it's never happened before. But I do remember hearing a crunch and thinking, what was that? What on earth was that? And then later on, I think it was my head hitting something.
Helen and Donal had slid out of sight of their companion, Tom Neal, who ran down the track towards the valley. He passed another tramper coming up, telling him there'd been an accident and he was going for help. Strangely, that tramper carried on up the track until he ran into Eric and Christine.
We were just about to sit down and have some lunch, actually. And then this young man came up to us and he said, this guy just ran past me and said his two friends had fallen and he couldn't see where they were. And this young gentleman had kind of gone, whatever, I don't know what to do about that. And he'd carried on walking up the hill and then met us.
And we sort of quizzed them and said, well, you know, did he say where? And they said, oh, no, he didn't even stop running. He just sort of yelled this at them as he was running past them. And we thought, oh, okay, that's strange.
Because normally if your friends fall, you can see where they've gone. And so we thought, okay, well, let's not have lunch right now. Let's go and wander down and see what we can see.
And we picked up our stuff and we began walking down the path, but walking sort of 20 metres on the downhill side of it, so that, you know, the logic being, well, if anyone slipped, we will be between the track and where they went. So we sort of headed down, and then you sort of head down a bit of a ridge to start with, and then we cut across this sort of steep slope, and it was quite steep, like you've got decent footwear on, but equally you're aware that it's a slope that if you slip, even though it's sort of grass, the chance of you stopping is pretty remote. You get this sort of grass surface which is kind of plucked short. It's almost like a golf green because the snow sits on it, and as it slides in spring, it sort of plucks the grass. So you get these very smooth grass slopes. And we're walking across one of these on the grass, and above us is a snow slope which is sort of wet and dripping.
When we got to the bottom of the snow patch, we found a scarf that was about, I don't know, a metre or two before the edge of the cliff. And so we were like, okay, skid mark, scarf, let's keep looking.
Once we saw that, we thought, okay, something's wrong, you know, but it just seemed to say something happened here. And you look at the slope and it kind of, it rolls out of sight. So you're on the steep slope and you just sort of 10 metres below you just have a sort of horizon line where it disappears into a gully. So we sort of cut across the slope to a bit of a ridge. We got to the ridge and looked over, and then we saw below us, like 60, 70 vertical metres, this person.
At this point, Christine and Eric activated their PLB, Personal Locator Beacon. The beacon sends an alert via satellite to the rescue centre in Wellington, who contact the local search and rescue team. And they were confident that help would not be far away. Cascade Saddle was less than half an hour from Wanaka by helicopter. But as it turned out, help for Donal and Helen was a lot further away than they might have hoped.
I do remember thinking, I'm not ready to die. I can't die, because I realised I wasn't stopping. I didn't know what was happening, and I thought, I'm not ready to leave. Whenever I came to, Donal wasn't there. You know, I couldn't understand that. I couldn't get my head around it at all. And I had the wherewithal to know that, oh, maybe this is an emergency situation. And we had an emergency bag, get a yellow one. And I thought, I should put that, I should get into that. This is an emergency. You know, if there was an emergency, you would keep warm.
I was looking down over the cliff and I could see Helen McClements. She was lying flat at the bottom of this very steep gut, probably about 150 metres down. She was calling out, help me, I'm sorry. And I was like, oh, okay, that's quite far down.
So we dropped our packs and I immediately sort of went into kind of rescue mode, and it's like, okay, what do I need? And it's like, well, the person's going to be, you know, shocked, they're going to be cold, I'm going to need the rope, I'm not going to need this. So I sort of emptied my pack down to the minimum because I knew it wasn't going to be easy to get to her. I knew it was really going to be quite a struggle. So it was very much a steep ravine and there's no obvious way in. I began sort of descending this ridge which runs parallel to the ravine that the woman was in, because it was really, you know, a relatively vertical face between where we were and where she was. And I went down and came to this sort of this ledge in the face, which was, it's not the place I would choose to go in any normal situation. It was a very steep cliff, then this ledge which was covered in loose gravel, and then it dropped off almost vertically again on the other side. I was making these judgments about, you know, here was a person who might die if I don't get to her. And I was kind of like, well, I know I can take this risk. And then the ledge got to a point where there was a distinct drop-off. I can remember standing on the edge of it, looking at it, going, well, it's not going to be a fatal jump, but it might be a jump that breaks my ankles if I get it wrong. And I was like, it's probably worth the risk.
Eric sized up the jump, made the leap, and landed without injury, and made his way down to Helen. With some difficulty, Christine also joined Helen and Eric on the ledge.
Like the couple who came down, and they were gorgeous. They just were so. I was going, where's Donal? Where's Donal? And I don't know what I looked like. I don't know what shape I was in. But I remember not thinking I was badly injured and thinking, I can come with you. And I just remember thinking, I'm okay, but my back definitely feels a bit funny. You know, something doesn't feel quite right. I feel very stiff. And then they said, maybe just lie there. You're probably okay.
She was kind of lying in a pool of water at the bottom of this gut where it was a bit of a waterfall coming down there. She'd obviously injured herself. She couldn't move.
She was sort of sitting in a stream. You know, my sort of first aid skills came to the fore, and I just did the basic A check looking at her, and then I just wanted to make sure there weren't any spinal injuries just by checking.
He got her into a sleeping bag, propped her head up on a pack.
And she was sort of going, what about Donal? Where's Donal? Kept asking, and of course, you know, I didn't know. I stood up, looked around, and then I could see down below me there was a sort of 10-metre waterfall or so, and I could see a person. I thought, oh good grief, you know, there's not much hope of surviving that. I abseiled down and got down to the bottom of the waterfall. It's really quite a grotty place. It's like a wardrobe tilted on an angle with one wall being ice, the other wall being rock, and a sort of ice cold stream tumbling in over the top of you. Donal, who was breathing at the time, and I was like, good grief, you know, this person's alive. And you know, his breathing is incredibly laboured, you know. I mean, I don't want to be disrespectful, but it was almost animalistic. You know, you're just hanging on for life. Your airways choked and collapsed, and you're just struggling to breathe. So I moved him a bit to open his airways and make him more comfortable. Didn't want to move him too much because, you know, there's obviously incredible trauma had happened in the fall, and, you know, you're always worried about any spinal problem making it worse by moving someone too much, you know, whereas a specialist with the right stretcher and back brace can sort of, you know, do it properly. So for the first 10 minutes or so, I just stayed with Donald and, you know, monitored his breathing and thought, okay, you know, let's just try and keep this guy comfortable.
We were both down there with Donald. He was lying face down the hill, kind of in the stream, wedged under the melted out snow. You know, he was clearly not in very good shape, but we couldn't do anything in the position he was in. So we talked about it and we said, well, we have to move him, even if he's got a broken neck. You know, there's nothing we can do with him like this. So, and he was quite a big guy.
A very full-on situation, and finding somewhat sort of superhuman strength, I managed to just kind of lift him out of where he was and then brace him across my knees.
His face was a mess. He had this huge bulge on his head and his eye was all messed up and there was blood everywhere. But we did manage to find a pulse. He was still breathing. Somehow we knew he was Irish. I was singing, there's only one Irish song I know, so I was singing that to him, Danny boy. And yeah, we were obviously waiting and hoping that search and rescue were going to be there very soon.
His breathing got progressively weaker and weaker, and I realised I was going to have to do resuscitation. So I started resuscitation, and then in all of this, in my mind was the miracle solution. It's like, I just need to stick at this and the search and rescue people will turn up. There's going to be a paramedic who's going to give him an injection, do this, do that, and I'll be sitting next to his bed in Dunedin Hospital in 2 days' time saying, well, isn't it great that you're still here? So, that was totally the picture in my mind. I was just 100% committed that this was going to work out. It was all, I just needed to stick at it.
He'd left his pack up with Helen and that had the other sleeping bag in it. So I went up the abseil rope that he had rigged, and the anchor he'd used was this kind of triangular shaped rock. So not a very secure anchor at all. But I didn't see that until I got to the top, and I was like, holy cow. I'm glad that didn't slip off while I was climbing up. I talked to Helen, reassured her. I said, yes, we're looking after your boyfriend. He's down here. He's still alive. We're doing what we can for him. Hopefully the rescue services will be here soon, because when we set off our PLB, we assumed that search and rescue would be there within, 40 minutes or so. As we found out afterwards, they didn't get a very good signal from our PLB, and there was a bit of confusion with another search and rescue operation that was happening at the same time for this glider pilot that had got lost or crashed somewhere up near Omarama. They thought it was a bounced signal from that PLB, and so they weren't really responding to our PLB at all.
Unaware that the PLB was not being responded to by authorities, their rescue now depended upon Helen's other companion, Englishman Tom Neal, who, following the accident, had run down the track to a sparring hut to raise the alarm. But this all took time.
So I grabbed the sleeping bag and then had to use the abseil rope to go back down, which was really a bit hair-raising, because I wasn't confident in the anchor at all, but I had to just trust it. And as long as I kept my weight low on the anchor and, didn't pull it upwards, then it was fine.
Meanwhile, a few hours after triggering the PLB, news of the accident eventually reached Wanaka Police Station, relayed by DOC, Department of Conservation.
DOC notified us on this occasion from Sparring Hut through to DOC here and across the road to the police station.
Sergeant Aaron Nicholson, Police Land Search and Rescue Coordinator, was in charge when the call came in.
Sorry, you got me?
Yep, are you there?
Yep.
Someone had fallen down Cascade Saddle up near the pylon, which we'd had previous fatalities near that area.
What did you know about what had happened?
So the extent of the fall, the people involved, I didn't really have much of an idea about, apart from there were 2 people involved, plus the person who raised the alarm, and didn't know if anyone else was up on the hill. We realised that was uber serious, given the previous incidents that had occurred there. So it was, all hands to deck, get up there as quickly as possible. So we just kicked off the SAR response, which normally would be responded to by way of an ACR team.
ACR is the Alpine Cliff Rescue Team.
To fly to the scene, assess it, deal with it, request further resources if necessary, but normally, the team that goes in can manage most things.
One of those assigned to get up there as soon as possible was Jeff Wyatt, one of the longest serving search and rescue members in Wanaka.
It was very sketchy details because at the time it had only been one of the surviving party just rushing off for help. We would have just known that a fall from, let's say, 50 metres below the pylon, which may or may not have had snow cover on it, would have ended up down a very steep face off the course of the track. So there was a presumption that it was a serious cliff rescue.
Jeff, now 78, is a seriously good mountaineer and guide, with many firsts to his name. These include the first ski descent of Aoraki Mount Cook, 99 guided ascents of Mount Aspiring, and with a wealth of search and rescue missions under his belt, dating from the early 70s. Also on the spot was a very experienced search and rescue helicopter pilot, John Roberts, who had been called in, like everybody else, at short notice.
I knew nothing about what I was going to, except where I was going. Going into places like Cascade Saddle and that, you still got your work cut out for you. You really do. Yeah. And I just felt a lot of pressure, you know, because I think everybody's expecting that you're going to get them in there.
Jeff Wyatt.
We talked briefly about what we were going to do on the flight in. It was just survey the scene, see if we could get a close landing, work out from there what we were going to do. And as it turned out, we were able to see figures down that steep distance of a couple of 100 metres down a near vertical cliff and realise we had a made task on our hands.
John was able to land experienced search and rescue volunteers, Jeff Wyatt, Dave Vass, Hugh Barnard and Davey Robinson, close to the pylon on Cascade Saddle.
We unloaded the gear. I was delegated to get someone down to the patients and check their life support.
A chopper extraction with a rescuer on the end of a strop seemed the most straightforward way.
I got the short end of the straw. I guess I was the most qualified medical person there, so they put me on the strop.
Being on a strop means a rescuer being suspended 40 or 50 metres on a line under the chopper, with nothing but thin air beneath. It needs nerve and skill for both the pilot and rescuer.
What were your first thoughts about possible extraction? Did it seem okay?
No, it looked like a very serious situation to me.
Pilot John Roberts.
It looked like one of those ones that, you know, you're going to have to get your shit together. So the first thing kind of I like to see is that I always check the line. Before I go anywhere, I'll physically myself check the line. And usually I like another climber to be there to check the person or the two people that are on the end of the strop to make sure that they've popped in properly, because we don't want, you know, we don't want an accident that didn't need to happen. And then I'll check the aircraft over. I have to take the doors off and make sure the aircraft's clean inside so nothing's going to blow out and what have you. It was about 15 knots on the ridge line and it was increasing. It was a bad forecast. We knew that we need to get on with this and get moving.
So pilot John Roberts took off from the ridge, fully expecting that Jeff, dangling from the end of the cable, would lift the injured trampers out and the hard part of the rescue would be done. But the mountains don't always play fair.
Our communication between me on the strop and him was purely by hand signals.
Jeff Wyatt, the guy at the end of the cable.
And then John Roberts flew across and down into the face, and that's when things turned to custard.
Very short flight to the accident site.
Pilot John Roberts.
The way I was going in is the only open way to go in. It's kind of a hole. It's like a vertical rock face on two sides, so you're not going to fly out of it. Once you go in there, you're in there. Got reasonably close to the accident site and I had quite a good crosswind pushing me in, and it was enough that I was maxed out on the controls.
In layman's terms, maximum means that John and his machine were being pushed into the rock face by the wind and did not have enough power to counter it. A very dangerous situation.
And it's not very often you hit max in a helicopter. You know, it's not a feeling you get very often.
It's not one you particularly wanted?
No, not really, especially with a guy I know on the end of the line. All I can remember was trying to go in from the way I did and then trying another way to get in, which would have meant my tail was against one of those rock faces, and you couldn't judge. It's just not a good situation to be in. My only way of communicating with the ground was to talk to the Wanaka police station, and then they'd have to call the boys, and then they'd have to relay it back to me, which is not ideal. When you can't talk to people on the ground, I can't go, how am I looking, how's my tail?
It was these risky manoeuvres that Christine, waiting anxiously for the rescue, observed firsthand.
A helicopter flew over and we were like, oh, thank God, the search and rescue have turned up. So they tried to get somebody down on a strop to drop them into where we were, but it was too windy. They tried several times and the person on the end of the strop, God, they were having a ride.
Jeff White.
I do remember we pulled out doing a huge pendulum out over the middle of the valley, and he flew straight back up to the top to have another chat about it. John said very clearly and bluntly, I don't want to be coming down, Jeff, when you're coming up on the strop and we end up colliding. John said, we're not going to be able to do a quick snatch and grab. We're going to have to go through the long haul of physically go down to do the retrievals. When he made the call, it's not going to happen, then there was no question about it.
Pilot John Roberts.
I've got a guy on the end of the line, got a decision to make. What am I going to do? I'm not going to risk my crew.
Yeah.
My theory on it is I'm the pilot in command, and if somebody's on the end of the line, they're my responsibility. It's got nothing to do with them. They can say what they like, but I'm flying them in, it's on me, and I wasn't going to do that. You'd have to think seriously about whether I even should have gone in with a strop when I don't have communication with anybody.
Still desperately giving Donal mouth to mouth, Eric and Christine were anxiously awaiting the arrival of the rescuers.
I couldn't see outside at all. I was in this kind of, this tilted room, like a wardrobe, ice, rock, waterfall, giving resuscitation to Donal. And Christine was kind of my relay to the outside world. And then it's like, are they here yet? Another 10 minutes later, are they here yet? She was like, oh, right, a helicopter's arrived. I was like, oh, right, that's good. And then it's like, are they here yet? And it's like, oh no, they're abseiling down the top of the cliff. And then, another 10 minutes later, where have they got to? Oh, they're still abseiling. So I think they had to do 2 or 3 abseils to get down to where we were.
After the failed helicopter rescue, it became clear very quickly that this job required more reinforcements, and a call was made to Wanaka.
More people, more rescuers involved.
Jeff White.
Because we were going to be in for an arduous extraction.
They had dropped some of the search and rescue people off, and they were putting in safety lines to get the search and rescue climbers down to where we were.
Making a decision that someone is dead is actually an incredibly hard decision. And I wasn't prepared to make it. I was like, that's not my decision to make. I'm just going to keep on trying. I just kept on doing resuscitation because it's like, I'm not going to stop until these paramedics get here.
The 2 rescuers who abseiled down to Eric and Christine were both highly experienced mountaineers and search and rescue volunteers, Dave Vass and Hugh Barnard.
Eric had managed to abseil down he had a sort of a very lightweight 30-metre ski touring rope and very little technical equipment for the terrain, but had done an incredible job in getting himself down and had been given CPR to Donal. I think he was breathing when Eric got to him, so I think Eric had a lot, invested in trying to keep him going, but it was a hell of a situation. I mean, wedged under this snow cone, water continuously coming down, just the ability to even move. Eric put himself in a lot of risk, or, he would obviously accept, experienced guy, but, he was underneath this melting out avalanche debris for a long period of time, and, that was a very courageous act, more so than us coming in and, doing our business. It became obvious pretty quickly that Donal was dead. And I remember Dave and I, having this what the fuck conversation about, who makes that call, to stop CPR, and I guess it fell upon us and Dave and said, listen, there's no point continuing, you've done an incredible job, but from our experience, we're not going to get this guy back.
That was really deflating because we had put so much energy into trying to keep him alive, and we had this, this expectation that when search and rescue arrived, there would be some miracle and they would give him the adrenaline injection and everything would be fine, and we'd go and visit him in hospital in a couple of days and it would all be good. Quite confronting to realise that we had witnessed the death of somebody.
Despite their heroic efforts, Eric and Christine's part in the rescue was now effectively over, and they made their way via the rescuers' ropes back up to the pylon.
After we climbed up out of the accident site, I can remember standing on the ridge, and it was just, again, it was this absolute beautiful blue sky day, this Mount Aspiring was there, beautiful white pyramid, and I could just remember thinking, can't the world just stop in silence for 5 minutes or 10 minutes? It's like something huge has happened. It seems so wrong but the world doesn't miss a beat, it just keeps spinning.
With Christine and Eric gone from the scene, there still remained the problem of how to get the seriously injured Helen to safety, now that Donal was dead.
We quickly made the decision that we would actually leave him there.
Rescuer Hugh Barnard.
That we would focus on getting Helen out. To put the effort into taking someone alive out was appropriate. To recover a body, it was best left for another day.
Leaving Donal, Dave Vass and Hugh Barnard climbed back up the ropes to Helen.
Was very fortunate to have survived the kind of fall she'd had. I mean, that was miraculous, really. She was obviously concussed. I think she had a head injury. She was obviously distraught, and in shock. She was continually asking after Donald. I think we made the decision not to tell her that he was dead, that he was down the, using language that wasn't an outright bullshit, but he was still down the hill, and we would be working to get him out, and just to encourage her to keep going with what she had to do, which was to, just stay alive. I kind of ended up in the role of supporting Helen, encouraging her. Often when we run a rescue, you're kind of the person who has that first contact, the bond that you make, like myself with Helen on that. That's a kind of a unique position to be in, and to be able to offer support in such an extreme circumstance. So you end up in that role, and it works really well to stay with that person the whole way. Over the course of a couple of hours, we've built a bit of a rapport.
I do remember that, or whenever they came down to get me, thinking, I have caused these people so much trouble. This is awful. They could see whenever they were strapping me into the gurney and things. I remember thinking, I could see in their faces that this was really, really difficult. It was shockingly difficult because I could just tell. And yet they were trying to look down and smile at me and say, you're okay, you're okay. Because I just had such a state or a feeling that this is all my fault. I'm the one who slipped. I've caused this. And I kept just apologising. I think as well how kind people are, because, this was just such a terrible, dire situation, and people putting their own lives at risk and trying to help me. Even in the throes of something horrific, you are comforted by the kindness of people. They were just incredible. These were complete strangers, and the reassurance, the fact that they were there just to support me.
And in the back of your mind all this time, were you wondering what was happening to Donal?
Of course, yeah. Because by this stage I knew that it was very, very serious, and I was thinking, what's happening to Donal? If all this is happening to me and this is taking hours, where's he?
Quickly became obvious that we were going to have to do an extraction using climbing kind of rescue methods rather than the aerial method. But it was complex terrain. We had to go up vertically for a while and then go across several steep ravines, and these are ravines that are, have a run out of 1,000 feet or something down, and it's all atypical climbing terrain. It's not clear, clean snow or ice or rock. It's rubbish, scree and tussocky ledges and steep and exposed.
Looking at the photos of this rescue, in one, the stretcher with Helen in it is being hauled across a near vertical slope supported by a network of ropes, and the rescuers dwarfed by the cliffs above, and below them just empty space. It's clear that there's no room for error. The rescue team, above and below, painstakingly hauled Helen's stretcher up the cliff until a small ledge was found and the helicopter could lift the stretcher off. Helen was flown to Dunedin Hospital to recover from a serious head injury and a broken pelvis, but was able to return to Ireland after a month or two to attend the funeral of her partner, Dr. Donal Derry.
I came home and I had to function and get better. And then whenever I started to get better, there was this sense of tension between Donal came a cropper because I slipped. I should be dead, but I'm not dead. I'm still alive. And I appreciate, Paul, it was an accident, but someone I loved lost their life. But I believe that Donal wouldn't have wanted me to stop. You know, if I just spent the rest of my life rocking back and forth in a chair, what kind of tribute would that have been to the fact that I lived? I'm going to grab life, and boy did I grab life. You know, I went travelling again, I went out with people. You know, I actually met my now husband quite quickly. And so I'm always so conscious that because of the speed at which other people may think I got back on my feet, that Donal didn't matter. And Donal has always mattered hugely. I basically carry Donal every day.
And Helen is this far away from the accident. How do you look back on that time?
I don't think anything in this life makes sense, Paul, you know, because that was my awful thing, that maybe Donal held me responsible. We were two people really in love. You know, he was a doctor, I was a teacher. We were trying to do things right, you know, to really good soul. He spent his life trying to make people better. There's many things he would have wanted me to do. And I had a few dreams where I was feeling absolutely wretched. And he came to me in the dream and said, it's all okay. Don't worry. I love you.
Christine and Eric, the last people to see Donal alive, had their own difficulties to deal with.
I don't think you can go through an experience like that without it affecting you forever. And, you know, it's obviously still distressing talking about it and reliving that time. It's still really upsetting. Where we were living at the time, we also ran our business out of the house. And I can remember customers, you know, calling up with some problem. I couldn't take anybody's problem seriously. It's like, somebody in my life has died and your problem is so inconsequential. I had no tolerance whatsoever. Looking back, obviously it was just dealing with this trauma that we'd been through. But at the time, you don't really realise that you actually need time to process that.
What did provide some relief was their contact with Donal's grieving parents back in Ireland.
You know, they were just really grateful to hear from us and to hear that we were there with him and that we did what we could for him and that we were talking to him. And his mum actually is a nurse and his sister's a nurse as well. And she knew that the hearing is the last sense to go when you're dying. And so for her, it was like, well, that's so good that there was someone there talking to him, because he would have, you know, it comforted her that then maybe there was some comfort for him that was, you know, he wasn't dying alone.
Eric and Christine were both awarded the Royal Humane Society's Silver Medal for Bravery. Next week, we go way, way back to the 1960s. when search and rescue was still pretty rough and ready.
This joke of the broken leg, all we did was just splint one leg to the other.
And local police found themselves out of their depth.
And he was down on all fours. I can't go on any further. I'm thinking, oh, God's sake.
As volunteers battle foul winter weather to rescue four climbers trapped high above Arthur's Pass.
And it was absolutely shocking conditions. Like, you couldn't see more than a few metres.
With the ever-present danger of getting buried under tons of snow.
9:15, there was a whoosh, and I sat up and touched my head on solid. I said, we've been avalanched, Pete.
That's next time on Search and Rescue NZ. Thanks to the producers of this series, Phil Vine, Justine Murray and Justin Gregory. Thanks to Ben Pearce, the engineer for this episode. Production coordinator, Brianna Juritich-Gregg. Executive audio editor, Tim Watkin. Find and follow Search and Rescue NZ on your favourite podcast app or at rnz.co.nz/podcasts. Kia ora and thanks for listening.